Are you ready to make the super cute Autumn Breezes Crochet Mosaic hat? Well, go ahead, gather your supplies, get that free pattern, and join me, Marley Bird, your By Crafty bestie, and we'll make it together. Let's go.
Show me love, show me love. This is all we got. Show me love.
Hello there, friends, and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, where you will learn how to make the Autumn Breezes Crochet Mosaic hat. This hat is absolutely adorable. No matter what two colors you put together, you are going to have a hat that everybody is going to love. So go ahead, get that free pattern. You'll find the link right down there in the video description box below. Gather your supplies, join me back here, and I'll get you started on this hat. You'll have it done in a weekend, I promise. Okay, friends, for this project, I used Brava Tweed worsted weight yarn in 2 different colors. Now, this yarn is an acrylic yarn, and it is so lovely to work with, but I understand not everybody wants to use the exact same yarn. So if you are substituting yarn, one thing you want to look at is look at the ball band. Make sure that you are looking for a size 4 worsted weight. That's what you're going for. And if you want to use the hook and needle size as sort of a guide for if that yarn will work for you, that is a good place to start. So this yarn is meant to be used with a size I all the way through a size K crochet hook. So if you're using a yarn that says, oh, it should probably be a much smaller crochet hook, it's probably not the right yarn for you. But chances are you have a worsted weight yarn that's going to be perfect, or you could get this really fantastic tweed looking yarn and get the awesome kind of rustic look of these patterns. All right, for the hat, you only need the size I, which is a 5.5 millimeter hook. And just so that you guys know, if you decide to make the fingerless mitts to match, you will also need a size H or a size 8 or a 5 millimeter hook for the cuff of your fingerless mitt. So I thought I'd just have it out here to show you. Plus, it looks really cool with the color scheme here, right? Okay, so what you need to do is decide which color is going to be your color A. Color A is the color that ends up being the cross in the mosaic stitch pattern. So if we're looking at this pattern, my black here is my color A, and you can see up here my color A becomes the cross. So you kind of have to decide what color do you want your brim, because that will also end up being the cross, like a big chunk of the color for the body of your hat. So choose what color you want to use for the brim. That will be your color A throughout the entire project. Once you have that, grab your hook, make sure you have that pattern, and we're going to jump in with some single crochet ribbing. And away we go. First things first, you want to put a slip knot directly onto your hook. Now we're going to do a series of chains here, and these chains are going to be the width of your brim, okay? They're going to be the width of your brim. So you'll notice that the number of chains you need to do is different depending on the size you are making. And it might seem like they're really long, but you got to remember it's going to be folded over. So you want to have a substantial brim. Clearly for the larger sizes, the brim's going to be a little bit larger than if you're making a baby size, right? So you want to chain whatever the number is for the size you are making. Next thing we want to do is we're going to single crochet in the second chain from hook. Now, remember, the loop on your hook never, ever, ever counts as a stitch. So as you're looking at your chains right here, that V right there behind your hook, that's the first chain. So you're going to go to the second one. And what I want you to do is I want you to only go through that back loop. Only go through the back loop of that chain and work a single crochet. Okay? If you have a stitch marker, I want you to go ahead, take that marker, and if you're looking behind your hook, can you see how there's a V right there behind your hook? I want you to put your marker right there in that V, so that way you know where the last stitch of your row is when we come back, okay? We're going to continue on, going to the next chain, going through the back loop, we will single crochet. And we'll do this all the way down. So if you chained 17, you're going to end up with 16 single crochet. If you chained 21, you're going to end up with 20 single crochet. All right. If you want to change this up, if maybe you don't want a double brim, you just want a singular brim, you absolutely could do that. You could chain whatever number you want. Maybe it's 6 and you end up with 5 single crochets. You absolutely could do that. This is your hat. There are no rules. But if you want that double brim look, this is what you want to make sure you are chaining to begin with. And we're just going into the back loop of each chain all the way to the end of the row. When you get down here, we will chain 1 and turn. Remember, the loop on our hook never counts as a stitch. We will not work into that chain, so we work into the back loop only of our first single crochet. You see it's right there? So back loop only. Yarn over, pull up a loop, work your single crochet. If you have another stitch marker, this is where you will want to put that second stitch marker into the top of that single crochet you just finished. It's that V right behind the loop that's on your hook. So now you know exactly where the last stitch of your row is. So if you are a crocheter that accidentally loses stitches or gains stitches as you're working along, these stitch markers will be very valuable to you. Now, as you're working along here, you might get really comfortable and you all of a sudden might tighten up your stitches or make your stitches way too loose. So it's very important as you're doing these single crochets, when you are creating the stitch, make sure the loop on your hook is the size of your actual hook. And when you go in and pull up that first loop, don't pull it up so tall that it gets really big like that. You're going to have a really not really nice tight single crochet ribbing. You want to make sure the loop that you pull up is still the same size as your hook. Okay, so I just pulled it up. It's the same size as my hook. I yarn over and I pull through both of those. If you use your hook, honestly, if you use your hook as a gauge tool to make sure all your stitches are the same size, you will notice that all of a sudden all of your stitches become very uniform. I come up to the last stitch of my row and I know it's the last stitch because it's marked. I go into the back loop only, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, chain 1 and turn, and then I can move my marker. So what will happen here, I turn, do not count the loop on my hook, do not count my chain 1. So I'm going to go into the back loop of the top of my single crochet here. So I go into the top of that, the back loop, I work my single crochet. That is the top of the stitch I just created. So I put my stitch marker right there and I continue on. Okay, you guys, can you see how this is going? You get sort of these really great ridges, okay? And I will tell you, if you're working these ridges too loose, you're not going to be happy with the way your ribbing looks. You definitely want to keep these stitches the size of your hook, or if you were to err the side of too loose or too tight, I would err on the side of too tight, honestly. Not that you want them really tight, but that's sort of one of those things I want to mention. As you keep going here, I'm going to set this aside. As you keep going, you'll see that your ribbing will start to look like this, right? Starts to look like this. And as you're looking at it, like this was the first row we did, right? We chained and then we turned and we worked back. And then this is the back of the second row. So every time you're counting these ridges here, like, so the top of that ridge right there, that's 2 rows. 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows, 2 rows. And as you're working along, when it comes time to work on the edge here, we will work into the end of each one of those rows. So essentially you're going to end up working into sort of like the top of that ridge and in the gully of that ridge. Okay. But this is what it looks like. This is about the elasticity you want to get. Okay, just remember that this ribbing, if you've done it correctly, it will get a really nice stretch, and you don't want it to stretch too much. Otherwise, when you're wearing your hat, it'll go on, it'll just fall down over your eyes. Sort of like that old Fat Albert cartoon where the guy always had the hat over his eyes. Sort of the same thing will happen. So you want to make sure that your ribbing has good stretch to it, but not so much that it's going to stretch too far over your head and just fall down. So there is a nice medium there. That's why you'll notice that it says, when you're measuring things, it's lightly stretched, or if you're doing a certain number of rows, it's because with the gauge given in the pattern, that should get you the exact size that you need. All right, so this is what you're looking for, is this kind of stretch right here. And this here, this is the number of stitches for the baby hat. So you can see as that folds over, it gets a nice little brim there for the baby hat. And obviously the larger hats have more stitches here. So as it folds over, you definitely get a more generous brim there. But you can see even here with the longer brim, I still get a really great stretch. And I get to carry on once I get past this step. Okay, so what I need you to do right now is go ahead, chain the number for the size you are making, and work those single crochets in the back loop only until your brim measures the distance in the pattern, or you've done as many rows as are written in the pattern. Once you've done that, join me back here. We are going to seam our brim closed and then immediately carry on to the first row of the mosaic pattern, and we're jumping right on in. So hit pause on the video and then finish your brim and then come back here. It won't take you very long, I promise. It goes faster than you think. All right, go do your thing. Welcome back. Hopefully that wasn't too difficult for you and you're ready to move on. Let's go ahead and take a look at my blue brim that I finished here, and let's count how many rows I've done. So remember, this was my row 1, and so you have this ridge, that's 2. So every time I get to a ridge, that's another 2 stitches. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 42, 44, 46, 48, 50, 52, 54, 56, 58, 60, 62, 64, 66, 68, 72, because this was the other row, like that's the next ridge. So I've done 72, which if you're following along, that's the largest size brim. So I've done my 72 rows here and I'm ready to do my seaming. So what I'm going to do is I want to work. So I just finished this row right here. I probably have to, I think one fell out here. So I'm going to do one more. Did it? Yeah, it did right there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to chain 1 and turn. And I'm going to be working back through the back loop only here. But what I want to do is I'm going to take my chain edge, my cast on edge. And if you can look right here, these loops here, they're the front loops of the chains that we didn't use. Remember, we went through the back loop. Can you see that chain right there? And then like there's one right here. And so if I were to keep going along, I could put one in each one. You see that? Can you see where those are? They're the free loop from my beginning chain. Okay, they're the free loop from my beginning chain. What I'm going to do here is I am going to work into the back loop only of the row I'm on and work into that free loop of the beginning chain. The benefit of joining in this way is that we're still using our crochet hook to seam this together so we don't have some extra sewing. But if you prefer to do a whip stitch join, you absolutely could do that. It's totally up to you. You could finish off your stitch and then do a whip stitch to seam it close. And then what you would have to do is rejoin your yarn as you're starting the body of the hat. But this keeps our yarn in play and it minimizes the number of ends we have to weave in. So hopefully you find this very easy and therapeutic. I like to do it. Let me show you. Okay, I know this is darker yarn, so I'm going to keep that marker in there so hopefully you can see what I'm doing. But I'm going into the back loop only of that first stitch, just like what you've been doing literally the whole way here, okay? And then I'm going to come over here to the very first back loop, or what would be the front loop of that chain. Okay, so it's right there. It's from my chain edge. And I'm going to slip stitch through it. So I pull my yarn over through that one, through the active row, and then through the stitch on my hook. And then I go to the next one. So I go to the next back loop only over here. I go to the next chain over here. It's right there. Okay. Yarn over, pull through, pull through, pull through. All right. You want to make sure that these chains, or these slip stitches, just like we were doing with all the others, they are the same size as your hook. Okay. So you don't want to pull them too tight. Otherwise you'll get a bunched up brim. So you go into that back loop. We're going to go into that free loop of the chain. It's just the corresponding loop. Yarn over, pull through all of those, and we get a slip stitch. So I'm going to keep going here, and you'll start to get like a good rhythm, and you'll be able to see if you're accidentally skipping one or not. And if you accidentally skip one or you put two in the same one, it's really not that big of a deal. Don't stress it. As long as the final finish here looks good, that's all that really matters. We're going to go all the way up to the top, and it's just joining this together really nice. And you don't have to do any extra seaming. It's just a pretty easy thing to do. That is the beauty of this hat in particular, is that it's a very little finishing that you have to do, which is different than a lot of the mosaic stitches out there. You'll know that there are some mosaic patterns where if you're doing one row patterns, you have to cut the yarn every time. But because we are working in the round for the hat, we will not have to cut the yarn every time. We're just going to carry it up on the inside, which is lovely because we will not have as many ends to weave in when everything is said and done. I think the hardest part with that is just maintaining yarn control when it comes to them trying to get like a little bit twisted together or not. Yarn management, I guess that's the word. Come all the way up to the top. Make sure you get all of them all the way to the top. All the way to the top. Pull it through. This is what it looks like. Look how great that looks. So then when this comes up, you can't tell. You can't tell at all. Isn't that great? I love that. That's awesome. Okay, so go ahead, seam yours up. Once you get that seamed up, the next step is to evenly space out single crochets around the edge of that brim. And the number of single crochets you need to do is equivalent to the number of repeats you will be working in the stitch pattern, which the stitch pattern is a multiple of 8. So for me, I'm making the largest size and I need to do 72 single crochets. Well, I did 72 rows. So in theory, I should be able to do 1 single crochet into the edge of each row. So here's what I do. I just chain 1 and I literally just go right into the edge. So I pick, like there's a strand right there. Can you see that strand? I just choose, I'm going to go into that, yarn over, pull up and pull through 2. I am going to put a marker there just to signify the start of my round. I find that very, very helpful. Okay. And now the next one is like the ridge. So what I do is I literally just kind of go around the post. Can you see I'm around the post of the stitch? And I just single crochet around the post. Now you can see like there's that hole right there where it's that strand again. I just single crochet in the strand and I'm back to the ridge. So I single crochet around the post. And if you do something similar to this, as long as you keep it consistent, it's going to look really nice and neat. Consistency really is the key when it comes to this. And because we're making a hat and the brim is going to come up and it's nothing here is going to show. You're not going to have any holes or anything like that in your work as you're working along here, but just be consistent with it. So go around the post of the stitch when you're on those ridge rows where you're looking at the back side, and then just that one strand right there on the edge, just go through that and just keep it consistent. And that puts it where you have 1 single crochet in each row that you completed. So at the end of all this, you should have the number of stitches you need to do. If you don't, if you need to add one, add one. If you need to subtract one, subtract one. It's not that big of a deal as far as if you need to add or subtract one. What is a big deal is that you do get that multiple of 8, okay? Otherwise your stitch pattern will not work, all right? We wanna get that multiple of 8. So go ahead, work all the way around. It will take you a little bit of time, especially if you're making the larger size like I am, but you kind of get in this really good rhythm. Just go around the post and go into that one. Okay, as we come up to the end here, this is how we're going to join every single round on our project, okay? So we have our marker here, right? What I want you to do, if you've never done an invisible join before, this is what we're going to do. Extend out that loop that's on your hook, and then come over here where your stitch is marked and take your hook going from behind working it towards you, go underneath the top of that stitch. Then I want you to take this loop and put it back onto your hook. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull that loop through the top of that stitch and we get an invisible join. Okay, that's the join you will use throughout the entire hat. We use that invisible join. Okay. After you do that invisible join, if it's time to change colors, it'll be real easy. You'll just change colors and chain one in your new color and it's hidden on the inside. You don't have to worry about special types of color changes, but this makes it very, very easy to do. Okay. Now, the next round we're going to do is the first round of our chart. So it's important for us to take a look at the chart at this point. So whether you're following along with the written instructions or the chart, they are both the exact same thing. So you do not have to use a chart. However, using the chart allows you to really visually see the pattern that you're going to create. And what you'll notice is I have given you two charts that they're the same chart, but they're represented in two different ways. And I want to explain how that works. So let me go ahead and grab that chart here for you. This here is the mosaic chart for the Autumn Breezes crochet hat. You will notice there are two charts here. Each chart is representing the stitches in a different way, but no matter which chart you follow, you will get the same results. Let's look at this one up here to begin with. First things first, you'll see that the very first row here or column of stitches here, those are not stitches. See how it has a 0 right there? Okay, that has a 0 right there. That A and B, A and B, A and B, that is just to let you know that you are either using color A or color B. So these are not actual stitches. Those are just color A or color B. Same thing for over here. It's just a column to let you know, hey, when you start this, you're going to be using color B or color A or color B or color A. Okay, so that's the first thing that I want you to recognize. The second thing I want you to recognize is the orange line around all of these. That's your pattern repeat. So the pattern repeat begins on round 3 and it works all the way up through round 14. So when you get to round 14, you would come back down to round 3 and keep repeating that until your hat measures the size written in the pattern. Okay. As you look at row 1, you'll see that it says to use color A and you're just going to work across these stitches with color A. What are you going to do? You're going to single crochet in the back loop only. You're always going to single crochet in the back loop only whenever you see just a solid square. If you see an X, that's where you're going to do a special double crochet in the front loop in the stitch 2 rows below. Okay, it'll make sense when we get to it, but that's why it's important to know those X's when you're on that row. So let's look at row 3. The first stitch, you would single crochet back loop only. Second, single crochet back loop only. Third one, you're going to mosaic double crochet all the way down here into the front loop of this stitch right down here on row 1, which when you do that, it will make it look like this entire section here is your color B. Okay. So what I mean by that is if you're looking at this, okay, this right here, that is that stitch right there. Okay. That's that right there. Okay. And you can see that that stitch there, you know, it was worked on row 3, but we did that double crochet down here into the first row, which makes it, you know, give this long elongated look here of a line to get that stitch. Same thing goes when you're talking about your color B. On row 4, you can see there's a double crochet with color B in those 2 X spots. And that's where you get the brown in this, where you get those lines. That's how you get those lines created. What I don't like about this particular pattern for crocheters is that I think it can be deceiving when you see both colors in a row and you're like, well, what do I do there? Like, what am I supposed to do? When you're on row 2, it's like, okay, so I'm single crocheting with my B, single crocheting with my B, but what does that mean? What does the plain white mean if I'm supposed to be using B on that row? right? Because you're really not doing anything. That white really isn't, it isn't there until this is done, right? Because that's what goes over top of that. So what really happens is if there's another color as you're working across here, if there's another color in that row and it is not an X or whatever it is, or here, let me say it this way. So what really happens here is as you're working across this row, you will be doing single crochets in the back loop only on every single stitch across. The only time that changes from one row to the next is if there is an X. So for example, on row 3, single crochet back loop only, single crochet back loop only, mosaic double crochet, so that will attach it down to here, single crochet back loop only, single crochet back loop only, single crochet back loop only, double crochet mosaic, so it attaches it down here, single crochet back loop only. And all of those are done with color A. Even though those two squares are gray, they're still done with color A. It's confusing, right? I think it's confusing. So what I've done here in the second chart is I've eliminated the colors that are opposite the color you're using on those rows, and I've just left the X's in play. So that way you can see what you're doing on that row precisely. And I think that's just so much easier. So if you look down here, row 1, it's all single crochet in the back loop only with color A. Row 2, all single crochet in the back loop only with color B, which is exactly what you're doing up here. Remember, it's the exact same thing, but this one shows that white in your stitch number 3 and your stitch number 7. So this one up here is more representative of, oh, this is what your stitch pattern is going to look like. We're down here, it's a little bit harder to tell, but I think this one is easier to read as a crocheter because you're like, okay, row 1, I'm just using color A, single crochet back loop only all the way across. Row 2, just color B, single crochet back loop only all the way across. Row 3, single crochet back loop only with color A, except when I get to stitch number 3, I'm going to do the double crochet mosaic and then single crochet back loop only in the next 3, and then mosaic double crochet again down there, so on and so forth. Row 4, I'm just using color B, right? Single crochet back loop only for those 3 stitches, double crochet, mosaic double crochet, single crochet back loop only, mosaic double crochet, single, single. Can you see this? So to me, this is easier to read than this, especially if you're new to mosaic stitches, because this lets you know, hey, you're always going to be doing single crochets in the back loop only with the color that's written on the side here. The only thing that changes is if there's an X on that stitch, you're actually doing a mosaic double crochet. You're not going to be doing the single crochet in the back loop only. I know right now it feels like it's clear as mud. It'll make more sense as you're working along. And the other thing is, because I know that this could be really confusing when you're looking at charts, it can be really confusing. That's why we always add the written instructions as well whenever we can, so that way you can follow along with the written instructions. So if you're unfamiliar with charts and you want to make sure you're doing things correctly, you can always compare the written instructions to the chart to make sure, hey, am I understanding this right? Is this what I'm going to do? And that's a great thing we can do. But knowing that this is our chart, we know that the first round, right? The first round, we're going to single crochet in the back loop only, still with our color A. And then the second round, we're going to single crochet in the back loop only with our color B. Nothing big. So what I want to do is I want to work on this together. Let's work on the single crochet in the back loop only with our color A. And then I want to show you how to change colors when we get to round 2. Okay, so here we are. So I'm right where we left off. Okay, right where we left off. I chain 1 and working into this very first stitch there. That's the first stitch. I'm going to work into the back loop only. I'm going into the back loop and I'm single crocheting. And get very familiar with this. This is what you do the entire round, right? I'm going to put my marker there. And I do want to warn you, working in the back loop only like this, these stitches can get very big very easily. So you want to be very careful you're not overextending that first loop. So when you go in to that back loop, yarn over and pull up. Make sure that first loop there is the same size as your hook. So that way your stitches are nice and consistent. Okay, back loop only. And we're going to do this all the way around with our color A. And then we're going to get to the end, do our invisible join, and add our color B. Okay, can you see how that's working up? Show you again. All right, I'm going to get around mine. You get around yours. I'll meet you at the end of this round. When you come up to the last stitch of your round, remember we want to do that invisible join. So again, extend out that loop so it doesn't go anywhere. Going from the back towards you, put your hook into that marked stitch. You can take your marker out at this point if you want, if it kind of feels like it's in the way. Take your loop and put it onto your hook and then kind of snug it up, and you're going to pull that right through the back of that to the back of that stitch. Okay, that's your invisible join. All right, we haven't chained one, we haven't done anything because this is where we're going to change colors. Okay, we're going to start round 2 after we do our change colors here. Okay, so here we go. We're going to change colors. I have a request from my son that I make this hat in these colors, so we're going to use this really great teal, and I'm just holding the tail of my teal here. I make sure I leave a nice long tail, yarn over and pull up a loop with my new yarn. And I'm just going to let my color A just hang out. I'm not going to do anything else with it. Now I have my new color on my hook, and I'm ready to go on with round 2. And round 2, again, has us begin in the back loop only right here in the very first stitch right there, okay? So I'm going to go into that back loop only, the very first stitch. Give it a tug. Put my marker in. I like having markers, can you tell? And then same thing, go in the back loop only all the way around. As you're doing this round, it's a good opportunity to count all your stitches again on this round, because as you transition from this to the next, that's where you really want to make sure you have the eight stitch repeats. So you want to make sure you have the correct number of stitches. So count your stitches as you're working them on this round. And I'll see you at the end of the round. I am to the last stitch of my round. And I can come over here, do my invisible join. Having the marker in there actually makes it harder for me to do the invisible join, but at least I know where the first stitch is. It's right there, all right? Pop that in. Pull that through, make it nice and snug. And then I change colors. So I drop my color A, pick up my color B, chain 1. So now I'm ready to go with my color B, and I'm ready for round 4, right? Okay, so here we go. We're going to do the mosaic double crochet again, only this time when we come down, we're going to work into this color. We'll always be working into color B. All right, so we're going to follow along with round 4. So round 4 has us begin with a single crochet in the back loop only for the first 3 stitches. Okay, first 3. And now we're going to do a mosaic double crochet. So we yarn over. You can see, I want to show you this. You can see here on row, see how the X is right next to that one, right? So if you're curious, are you in the right place? You can kind of see here on the chart, oh, that one is going to be right next to that one. Or even if you're looking up here, like this is the first one we did from round 3. Here's the one we're going to do from round 4. They're going to be side by side. Okay, hopefully that's something that might be helpful for you to see. So if you're trying to figure out if you're in the right place, like here's the one we just did from the previous round. Here's the next stitch. So I can come down, I can see the bar right there. Go underneath the bar, work my double crochet. Make sure I skip the stitch behind it. And then I'm going to do 1 single crochet in the back loop only. And then I do it again. So I'm going to skip. So that's the one I went into. I skipped that bar. I'm going to go into this bar over here. And if you kind of use the stitches you've already done to kind of read your crochet, you won't ever get off track. And honestly, once you get past I'm going to say like round 8 or 9, you really start to get a rhythm here and it just becomes rather easy to do. All right, so I did my single crochet in the back loop only here for the 2, and then so that would be the end. That's 8 stitches, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's one repeat. So then I go back to the start of my row and I do it again. So I do the start, which is 3 single crochets in the back loop only, mosaic double crochet. Remember, you're putting those mosaics double crochets into that row with the same color that you're using. That's a good kind of rule of thumb. Very seldom is that not the case. Okay, and then finish up. So as I look at this, when I did this round, I was like, oh, okay. So I do 5 singles, a double, a single, a double, right? Like that's in my head, that's was really easy for me to remember. So like right here, I did the single, double, or double, single, double. So I've done the 2 of the 5 single crochets I need to do. So that's 2, here's 3, here's 4, here's 5. And remember, you want to keep these as consistent as possible, because you can see how much stretch you get there. You can get a lot of stretch in these hats. You want to be very careful. And it's important that you get used to that now, because you're really going to have to pay attention if you decide that you want to make the fingerless mitts, because it's definitely something you have to be aware of, because it gets a lot of stretch. But we're going to work all the way around, okay? So hopefully you can kind of see how those are working up, okay? I'll start to give you some dimension here. Let's work all the way around, get back to the beginning, and I will meet you there, okay? Okay, as you come up to the end, you should finish off with 2 single crochets. Extend up. Make sure you put your hook into that first stitch there. Pull it through, and you're good. Everything's starting to take shape. So you're ready to move on to round 5. Again, you're going to change colors. So you drop your color B, pick up your color A. That chain 1 is the first stitch of your round 5, right? And you're ready to continue on. Now, here's a tricky one, because the very first stitch of round 5 is a double crochet, a mosaic double crochet. So we know this is the stitch I just pulled through, right? So that's the first stitch. So if you look for the bar right underneath it, it's right there, okay? So you just literally, you're going to yarn over your hook, just come down here to the very first bar. And it's important you pick that, you get that first one right? Because you want to, it's going to set the tone for the rest of the round. So once you do that, now we have 3 single crochet in the back loop only. And for me, it's really on this next one that it will tell me if everything was in the right place, because this next one, my mosaic double crochet is right here. Like it's almost like it's the top of a triangle here. It's going to go right into there. And by putting that in the correct place, that sets me up for this in the correct placement. So it's a quick way that you can kind of self-check if everything is starting off in the correct place, right? And then you carry on, you do the 3 single crochets in the back loop only. And then we do it again. So we yarn over, come down, find the loop we want to get into, use it, and then this is your test. You know, the next 3 should take you over to where you're essentially creating that triangle there, right? You can see that both in your fabric here. And then I know that for me with this, like it helps me because I can see that happening right there. And then over here, I can see it happening right there. Okay, that's how I use the charts to really kind of test myself and make sure that I have my stitches in the correct place. Okay, can you see how this is starting to take shape? So as you keep going in your rounds in this manner, you will notice that the mosaic stitches really start to take shape. I would say as you get to about round 8 or round 9, that's where you start to notice things are really happening. But even here at the start, if we compare it to one of the samples here, so as I mentioned, you know, you have this sort of triangle that we were working here. If we try and find that over here on this, it's right there. Can you see that? So it's literally that double crochet we just did right there. It's the start of what's going to be this cross. You can see that? So this cross, all the crosses will be done in your color A. So that's another way you can really check things out. So it's just a lot of fun to do. You're going to really find that this is super addictive as you're going along because you just want to see how the next color takes shape. And honestly, if you just are really careful and make sure that you are dropping down and working into the front loop of the correct stitch, you won't have any problems at all working through this. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to work through all of these stitches through round 14, and then you're going to go back to round 3 and then repeat it. That's your repeat. And you're going to do that until your hat measures the distance written in the pattern. Now, I want to mention something about that distance. Like, first off, it does not include the brim, okay? It does not include the brim. And what you might think is that distance, you might be like, gosh, that looks like it's really long. But here's the deal. If you notice the top of this hat, if the pom-pom wasn't there, it all comes together really quickly at the top of the hat. So even though it's really long, it all comes together and it pulls together like this. And if you don't have the body of your hat long enough, then your hat portion is going to be too tiny, and like the brim is going to pull up on your ears and it's just not going to fit right. So I highly recommend working it to the distance that I did right in the pattern. If you decide to go rogue, that's okay. It's your hat. Like I said, there are no rules, but I did want to tell you why those distances are written in that way. Especially for a hat like this, like it's, in my opinion, it's better to have it a little bit taller than shorter. But you also have to remember there is a lot of stretch here with those back loop only stitches. So you do want to be careful that you're not making it too big. All right. If you keep those stitches consistent with the size of your hook, it'll come out really nice and neat, and you'll have a hat that, I mean, everybody's going to love it. It's just fantastic. So what you need to do, as I said, work in these mosaic stitches following the pattern until the body of your hat measures the distance you need it to. And then join me back here and I will get you finished with the top of the hat. And then I'll show you how I add a pom-pom if you want to. You don't have to, but I want to be able to show you how to do all of that. So if you want to hit pause on this video, that's totally fine. But go finish your hat and then join me back here when you're done. And we'll do the finishing up together. You're gonna love this. It's so addictive. Okay, go. Well, hello and welcome back. I don't know about you, but I just spent the last 3 hours working on my hat, and I am to the point that I needed to reach for the largest size, and I'm ready to move on to the crown. So if you're at that point as well, let's take a look right down here. This is my lovely hat. Look at this. Now, I have ended after I finished a round with the color B, and I'm going to proceed with the crown with my color A. And I have very little color A left as I'm making the very large size. If you find that you're in the same place, you could finish with your color B. It would be okay. It would not be that big of a deal. But I just want to mention that out here. If you're running low on your color A like I am for the largest size, which is very large. It's a very large size for my son, as I said. But we're ready to carry on. All right. To finish off the crown of our hat, we will work single crochet 2 togethers all the way around the top of the hat. So it will be a rapid decrease. We're going to cut our stitch count in half. After that, we will cut our yarn and we will thread it through the stitches and then pull it like a drawstring to bring the top of the hat closed. If you wanted to do a second round of decreases before we pull the hat closed, you could do that. It's totally up to you. I didn't do it on my hat, so I didn't write that in the pattern. But just to make sure you know how to do a single crochet 2 together, this is what you will do. So I have gone ahead. I'm to the point where I can cut my color B. My color B is done for this project. So I left a nice long tail so I can weave that in. I've already chained one, so I go ahead and go into my first stitch through the back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, go into the next stitch over through the back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. So I have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over and draw through all 3 loops on your hook. All right, so that is the single crochet 2 together. And we're going to do that all the way around. So go to the next stitch, pull up a loop, the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull all 3 together. It's real important that you try and keep these stitches real close together so that way they're not pulling apart as we're working around. You just want to make sure that they're nice and snug. Again, if you keep them the same size as your hook, you will have some very consistent stitches happening here. So just keep doing that. We're going to work all the way around, going through the back loop only, doing these single crochet 2 togethers. Okay. So I'm going to go back, and work them together. When you get back to the start of the round, continue with that invisible join. So I'm going to do my invisible join, pull that all together. And you can see here that I have fewer stitches here. It's still, I mean, it's a lot of stitches for the larger size for sure, but I can definitely pull this together and it's going to look nice and clean at the finish. So I'm going to go ahead and cut myself a long length of yarn here. Okay, this length of yarn, I'm going to put it through all of these live stitches and pull it like a drawstring. Now, having said that, the yarn I'm using, like I said, it is the Brava Tweed and it's a worsted weight acrylic yarn. And it is a very sturdy yarn. Like if I pull on it really snug, it's not going to break very easily. If you have changed the yarn that you are using and you happen to be using a natural fiber that breaks apart really easily, so if you were to tug really taut, it's going to break. You want to be very cautious of that. If that's the case, I would recommend grabbing some acrylic yarn that's as close to a similar color as possible, or even maybe some cotton yarn that you can use to thread through all the stitches and use that to pull it tight for the drawstring. Then once that drawstring is pulled tight, you can use the tail that you've cut to really get everything closed as far as the top of the hat. Just a little suggestion there if that happens to be your case, if you've chosen a yarn that breaks easily, because we will be pulling these stitches really snug. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we're going to fasten this off. So you just yarn over and pull that through. So we fasten that off. And then you grab your bent tip tapestry needle. Okay, I love these bent tip tapestry needles. I find them extremely handy. And you thread your tail onto your bent tip tapestry needle. And honestly, we're just going to weave in and out the top of our hat here. Okay, we're just going to weave in and out just like so. And just pull that yarn through. We literally are going to pull this together like a drawstring. And then once we do that, we'll use the rest of our tail to seam the top of the hat closed because it's going to want to pop open at the top, but we won't let it. We'll seam it closed and it'll be nice. It's nice enough that if you don't want to use a pom-pom, you don't have to. You can absolutely just keep the hat as is. You guys know I'm a big fan of pom-poms, so mine will definitely have a pom-pom. So we will make that decision as we get to it, or I guess I should say you will make that decision as you get to it. You can see I'm just going all the way around, and I'm just going around once. I'm not going around twice. I'm just going around once. And make sure where I went out. Okay, go in, out. And I'm back to my beginning part here. Make sure here, I'm going to pull this through. Okay, this is actually one of the parts that I really like, pulling all these stitches together. So you can see even right here, it's already starting to pull together. So as I grasp my hat, I'm holding on the hat and I'm going to pull my tail here. That's going to pull that top closed like a drawstring. Okay, can you see that? So this is why I chose to finish off with my color A. I like that it finished with the blue and it started with the blue, but it does not have to be like that. Like you could absolutely go rogue. You could do whatever you want. Once this is closed, we're gonna see how you get that little hole there. We want that to be absolutely secure. So I'm gonna come over here to this side of my hole in the top of the hat and pop it over to the opposite side. And I'm just gonna start seaming this closed. And then I'm gonna go kind of like I'm going in the four corners, pulling it closed, and just do this all the way around the top of the hat. And it's not gonna show, everything's gonna look just fine. It's gonna pull the top of the hat together real nice, and you will have everything secure here, okay? So make sure it's all nice and secure. Once it's closed to a point that you really like it, take your bent tip tapestry needle and stick it down the middle to the inside of the hat. So pull this into the inside of the hat here. I'm going to turn the hat inside out because it seems easier to look at it that way. So here is the top of the hat here, and what I can do, I will weave in that in there, but this here, I can secure this some more if I need to as I am weaving in the tail. You can use the opportunity to kind of seam some here on the inside, just like you were closing it on the outside as you're weaving in the tail, and it just makes it nice and secure. You don't want it to come undone, okay? Once you feel like it is to the point that you are confident that everything's going to stay in place, you can go ahead and cut your tail, okay? Go ahead and cut your tail. And it's at this point in time you would take all of your other tails and weave them in to the inside of your hat. So there we go. All right. So all of my ends are tucked in, which technically means my hat is done, right? My hat is done. So you can see here's the top of the hat. It all came together really nice and neat. Like, it looks great. We have the bottom of the hat. It cuffs up really lovely. And you have this really great hat. Let's take a look at the hat up here. Look how lovely it is. Isn't that great? And if you look at the top, like, it looks fantastic. Like, I would absolutely wear this hat without a pom-pom on top if I wanted to. But there you have it. Now you know how to make the Autumn Breezes Crochet Mosaic hat. I hope that you had so much fun making it. I know that I had a joy teaching you all the tips and tricks and learning how to read that mosaic chart, work those mosaic double crochets and the back loop single crochets. Like, it's just a lot of fun. So have fun with this pattern, make lots and lots of hats, and when you do, make sure you share with me on social media. I'd love to smash your like button. All right, everybody, that's it for me. Marley Bird, your By Crafty bestie. I'll see you again later.